Hi, my name is Christopher Rawlings, and I'm with Howard Diamond. And we are actors with a group called Open Door Productions, which is a film and production company in central New Jersey. And we are starting something involving film discussion on classic movies that relate to social, political issues in today. And we thought of calling this Movies That Matter or Movies with Social Impact. But we're focusing on a movie that was made in 1958 called The Defiant Ones, which starred Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier. And we felt that this movie really directly related to issues that were happening in our country in the year 2020, as well as worldwide, with racial unrest and nationwide, even global protests. And we thought that the themes in this movie and the story was such a very impactful film would invite some great discussion and some reflection on the things that are happening in today's world. The film essentially is about two prisoners that escape being transferred from prison, I guess, to another location, and the white prisoner, played by obviously Tony Curtis, his name is Joker Jackson, and the black prisoner, African American prisoner, is Noah Cohen, obviously by Sidney Poitier, and they are chained together in this truck. So this truck crashes, overturns in the middle of the night in an accident, and these two prisoners now are on the run, but they are chained together. And the story plays out is how these men who are outwardly hostile and hateful to each other because of their racial background and their differences, how they are forced and confronted to cooperate and work together to survive in their mutual quest for freedom. So that's essentially the crux of the movie. So with that, I want to introduce Howard Diamond. Howard?
Thank you, Christopher. And I will tell you, it was a fascinating project to start to look at this movie in a deeper sense. It's a movie that some people have probably forgotten about and others remember it, but it's an impactful movie, as you said. I'm going to quote Bosley Crowther, who reviewed this movie in September of 1958. And quote, he said, "A remarkably apt and dramatic visualization of a social idea, the idea of men of different races brought together to face misfortune, and a bond of brotherhood is achieved by director Stanley Kramer and his new film, The Defiant Ones," end of quote. So it's 62 years old. It was a time period, and if we can see this, this was a Time magazine article that hit the front page back in October of 1957, paratroopers at Little Rock. It was a turbulent time. It was a difficult time for Black Americans. It was a time of transition. It was a time of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. coming to surface on the civil rights movement. And a lot of things going on like there are today with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and social unrest going on today and concerns. Right. So it was a transitional time in 1958, as today is a transitional time. So looking at this movie, I think that when one has to look at a good bit of some symbolism in it, you have to read between the lines of the writings. When I started to research this, the writers are Nathan Douglas and Harold Jacob Smith, but Nathan Douglas was actually a blacklisted writer of the time whose real name was Nedrick Young. And he wrote this under a different name. He himself was faced with challenges at the time. So as you've really done a good job in explaining the movie, the plot of the movie, it's important to recognize that it was unusual at the time, if not rare, for a Black prisoner to be chained to a white prisoner. And it was almost in the movie, they talk about the warden having a sense of humor for doing that. But we follow these two men throughout this movie, and we follow their ups and their downs and their changes and their own transitions with each other, which is really the backbone of the movie. And to me, what I've gotten from it is a couple of 2 or 3 different things that surfaced that are relevant today, as this was written in 1958, and keeping in mind that the director, Stanley Kramer, was a man before his time, you might say. A number of his films, including Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, were political statements that he made. He was a liberal thinking director. But what I got out of this, as we move on here, is that people do need to communicate with each other and not make assumptions of each other. And that's what you'll see in the character development of these two. That it's necessary to not just talk, but to listen to each other and reflect upon the challenges that others have. Because very often those challenges are similar to each other. I felt that when we rely upon each other to reach a common goal, our differences become inconsequential and invisible. And I think you're going to see that. We're going to show 3 scenes in this presentation. There's a lot more to the movie that we would expect you to go look at on your own, and some of this will make more sense when you do that. And also that empathy, not apathy, changes the way people see each other. You have to understand each other, as these 2 prisoners and these 2 men begin to do in this movie. So civil rights movement, challenges between the 2 that they're dealing with in their day-to-day life, all come together in the scenes that you're going to see here. These 2 men will find their way out of a world of prejudice and find a love for each other and a reliance upon each other by the time this you see the last scene in this. But just look between the lines is my message to this, because that's what Christopher and I have experienced by discussing this movie. And you'll see a lot more. The movie just.
I have to say that in my discussions, with Howard, even though I'd seen this movie before, and then watched it again recently, through our talking together, I was amazed and continually surprised at the nuances or the subtext, or just I thought almost what were hidden gems in the writing and in the imagery in the film. And I almost said, to myself, did the writers and the director, they really realize how pregnant with meaning so many of these images and this dialogue was, or maybe was it almost subconscious? Like one of the first things you mentioned, Howard, which was again brilliant, was, well, Sidney Poitier's name. His name is Noah, and thinking of the biblical character.
Yes.
What does that imply? There's so many implications there.
Yes,
just on his name.
He's leading the 2 of them out of trouble, out of the dark in this, to some level of safety.
Right. Their journey, I mean, quote unquote, their ark, yet Noah, in the ark, different spelling, A-R-K, A-R-C, but yet I just thought it was just brilliant. Again, whether it was deliberate or almost unconscious. So why don't we look at the first scene? We have 3 that we want to bring up here. And this is the first scene that I think we discussed that really starts to show their beginning of their evolution of understanding a little more about each other as men and as human beings. And when it starts to maybe crumble the walls of their isolation from each other and their racism, their ignorance, I think it's a scene that takes place as they've been on the run now for a while, and I believe this is their first night, and they have to find food. They have to eat. They have to find warmth. They have to find shelter, and they're going to get their first meal hunting in the woods, and they're going to start eating, and they're going to start talking together. So shall we watch the first scene here?
Let's roll.
Got him. Listen, what are they?
Night birds, mostly. Bugs.
I will stay shut up.
Thanks.
I keep listening for the dogs.
It's too soon.
Well, I must have started by now. How fast do you think they can go?
You know, roads in here gotta come on foot, same as that.
Animals in there?
Some.
What kind?
All kind.
Like what?
Like gators and wild pig, black bear.
How come they don't make any noise?
The animals. Gotta be hunted or hunting. Either way, they don't make no noise.
I'll go with that. Listen, there must be a million of them, and not one understands what the other one is saying.
They're just bugs.
Bugs are people. Nobody understands anybody. Them animals, they're smarter. You keep quiet, you hunt for yourself. I go with that. What was that?
Weasel. Hoot owl must have got him.
I thought you said they didn't make any noise.
Only when they're dying, Joker.
That's a great way to live. You keep quiet all your life, and the only time you open your mouth is when you're dying.
Thanks.
Why don't you cut it out?
Hmm?
You keep saying thanks. I hate that word thanks.
Don't mean nothing.
Don't mean nothing, huh? You try making a living with that word, you find out. I used to park cars in Nash's. Big fancy hotel. The fella give me his car, and I'd say, thank you, sir. Here, I was doing him a favor, but I had to say thank you, sir. And the louder I said it, the bigger the tip.
And that figures.
That don't figure nothing. You gotta be Charlie Potatoes, a man with the money. Then you don't have to bow down to nobody. That's the way I'm gonna live. Even when he didn't give me a tip, I still had to say thank you. That word got like it was sticking needles in me every time I said it. That can happen with the word. You know what I mean, boy?
Yeah. And I got a needle sticking in me right now. Look, Joker, don't call me boy.
Why, you're just too sensitive, man.
I'm too nothing.
That's right. You're too nothing is right. But I got a little advice for you, man, because I like you, man. You gotta take things as they are. You can't keep fighting them unless you want to be unhappy. I see you got a lot to learn, boy.
Like you living in that fancy hotel.
Yeah, like me living in that fancy hotel.
You think they're gonna let me in that fancy hotel, too?
Oh, sure they're gonna let you in that hotel. Through the back door if you got a pail and a mop.
And you through the front door just long enough to collect your tip.
What's eating you? Just because I called you a name?
Yeah.
Well, that's what you are, ain't it? It's like calling a spade a spade. I'm a honky. I don't try to argue out of it. You can call me a bohunk. I don't mind.
You ever hear tell of a bohunk in a woodpile, Joker? You ever hear tell of catch a bohunk by the toe?
Depends on how you mean it.
How'd you mean it?
Like I said it, now don't crowd me because I didn't make up no names.
No, you breathe it in when you're born and you spit it out from then on.
That name sure bugs you, don't it? Well, that's the way it is. And you're stuck with it, because I didn't make any rules.
No, but you sure live by him.
Everybody lives by him. Everybody's stuck with what is. Even them swamp animals.
Even that weasel.
You calling me a weasel?
No, I'm calling you a white man.
Okay. Wow. Every time I watch that scene, it still amazes me.
Well, it's dramatic, and I think we come out of the gate on this one when he says when Joker says there must be a million animals out there and no one understands what the other is saying.
Yes.
And I think this is something of the basis of the communication that I talked about earlier, is that people do not communicate to each other, and they weren't doing it in 1958. And there's a challenge today, 62 years later, with the same thing. And the communication, as you can see, develops between these two men as they sit there in the dark of night. They're breaking down barriers between each other during that
Yeah.
time together.
Yes. I like that. Again, the imagery that they use with the animals, the animal kingdom and the human race, essentially we're supposed to be more evolved, animals, mammals, but, what the animals do to survive, in the wilderness, what humans do to survive in the world. It just struck me, only the strong survive, and there's always there's territorial disputes, and there's a pecking order, and there's the microcosm of the animal world, looking at the macrocosm of the human race, on a larger scale. I just love that the fact.
Go ahead. No, finish your thought.
Just again how they used, and the line he makes that struck me was, that's the way to be. You don't say anything, until the moment you die.
And these two men, although they're fighting for their lives, are in a sense dying right now because they've got people chasing them. They've got adversity coming up. And in a sense, they could be dying, and they are talking to each other here where they couldn't communicate earlier with each other, or chose not to. You see certain similarities here when they talk about their social status, if you may. Joker comes into the hotel through the front door only to collect his tips.
Right.
Not welcomed in that front of the hotel. Right. Noah, because he's a black man, is not welcomed in the hotel. However, he can come in through the back of the hotel with a pail and a mop and walk in. But both of them are challenged by that situation of where they are socially, and they're tortured by it.
Yeah. Good point. And what struck me is the Joker character. He says the words, and he says it with such, vile disgust. You don't have to bow down to nobody. And look at what the black race has had to, the African American race has had to deal with, so tragically and so terribly for years and years and years, but here's a white man, talking about his taste of that particular kind of oppression, of course different, to a larger scale, but yet, the hatred of being put down like that, of being felt less and being, not feeling worthwhile and valuable, it's still there.
It's still there, and Joker is trying to become Charlie Potatoes because then that gives him social status, it gives him power, and considered a honky that he's dealing with. Now
that's his freedom in a sense. His freedom is to become Charlie Potatoes, the rich guy, with, as he says later, I guess with the girl on each arm and spending all the money he wants on a Saturday night, and getting anything he wants. And in contrast, but on the same trajectory, an African American man just wants to, live his own life and not, feel, the oppression.
Noah wants the respect of being a man, not being labeled a boy or an ethnic term. He wants respect, and Joker is also looking for respect, but his respect comes from stealing more and being Charlie Potatoes. And that's how he gets to where he wants to be. And they come to that agreement, not realizing that they are, but they're connecting on that same point.
Yes. I thought it was also an interesting line, Howard, where at one point Tony Curtis says, I'm saying this because I like you.
Yeah.
And that kind of struck me because before, the viewers won't see this, and of course, we encourage everyone to to watch the film. In the beginning, it's like they're ready to kill each other.
Correct.
The farthest thing from liking each other. That was just not in their universe. But now it's almost like they've started to try to work together, even though they're still very much at odds in a lot of ways. He says, I'm going to try to, I guess, give you a piece of advice. But what does he say? You have to, live by the rules. This is what everybody lives by.
Correct.
But the Joker character, Tony Curtis, he's subject to the same rules, and he's oppressed by the same consequences.
Exactly. And this is such a pivotal scene to the movie because I feel they reach some commonality in this, and they're still
Yes.
at odds, and there's still some, some explosive behavior going on between them, but there is a commonality that comes from breaking bread and sitting there and
Yes.
listening to the animals. There's a revelation that takes place between them.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's funny what has to happen, something like, survival before these barriers come down. When you boil it all down, when you have to survive, or you got to make this work.
Right.
They're both fighting for freedom, physical freedom. They want to get away, and of course at this point they want to, break that chain that's holding them so they can go their separate ways, as they're thinking, and find their own way. But when you have to make it work, you find a way. And what does even that portend to even in the issues that we're facing today, even with the pandemic and even the unrest that's happened in this country, even on that level? That's a whole another discussion, but do we as a country, as citizens all across all the states, really realize that we're in this to survive, and we have to come up with a game plan that's united and going to work? And here are these guys, they have to still find their way. They haven't, I don't think at this point, come up with a united game plan, except to, let's just get these chains off, and then we're gonna, we'll take our chances.
And the movie really exhibits a number of challenges that they have that we can't show in the short amount of time that we have here. But we have a river, we have rain, we have a clay pit, we have a number of things that they have to figure out together how to survive throughout the film. And, and it's really symbolic of social challenges that we could equate to today, that only through communication and teamwork and people relying on each other and wanting to rely on each other, most importantly, is that you can overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's weird. This just came into my mind. I don't think we've talked about this, but the one thing about having this type of discussion, but over a meal, over eating, and I was reminded that the one thing about eating together as people is, someone said that food is a great unifier. And even though this is in the most primitive of circumstances, and this was not obviously, planned, they're just doing this, but here they are together, they're sustaining their life, their physical life together by working together to find food, to prepare it, to eat it. And in that moment of could you say, bonding with surviving by eating, that opens up their minds and their hearts to start to at least try to understand each other.
Breaking bread, people lower their defenses.
Yes.
What is food? Food is comfort.
Yes.
Food is a way of bringing people together. And we could think of all the scenes in Seinfeld that all took place in over bread, and scenes in movies like The Godfather and other movies where food was an essential part of the discussion, because people are at ease and they're enjoying themselves while they're eating, and they're getting nourishment and eating, certain natural requirements. But during that time, they're able to open up.
Yes.
And that's exactly what they're doing, whether it's a cup of coffee or they're eating a frog. in this scene.
You're right, absolutely. And I want to point out one thing that, in terms of performances, the one thing that I saw a lot more prevalent in Sidney Poitier's character, at this point, he appears to be much more tired and much more exhausted. So, with that, I mean, they're eating ravenously, they're hungry, obviously, but he has his hands like this, and he's like, I think partially almost like he just wants to sleep and have a good meal. But, he's just finding comfort in that. He's getting his basic physical needs met. Whereas the Tony Curtis character, Joker, he's more on the alert. He's not as comfortable living in the outdoors. He doesn't know what the animals' names are. Sidney Poitier probably raised more rurally, for the most part. These are the sounds that he's heard all of his life.
Right.
It's like he's sitting in his living room.
And again, this connects to what I said and you brought up. He's Noah. Noah's comfortable with the animal kingdom. And he's comfortable with the animals and he understands them.
Right.
As Noah did.
Right. Very good.
What I'm saying.
Yes.
Now, it's easy to overlook that when you're viewing the film, but when you start to look like what you and I have done with this, it becomes very apparent that there's another facet of something going on here, and he's able to communicate again to Joker what the animals are saying and what it means, and that also helps to their bond here. Absolutely,
because it's funny, you see the hyper vigilance that Tony Curtis still has. What's that? What's going on? What's that sound? I keep listening for the dogs. And not that Sidney Poitier isn't concerned, but he knows enough to know that for now they have a little bit of safety, a little bit of time right now. It's on their side at this point. Not that they can rest on their laurels, but that was a good point. And also, let's talk about the sharing of the cigarette, because this does not come out because there's a scene that the audience has not seen.
Correct. And earlier in the film, Noah offers Joker a cigarette, and Joker has trepidation because he was uncomfortable with the notion of accepting a cigarette from a black man. Quite honestly, that's not something that he had done before.
Right.
But that changes. As their relationship changes, he does accept a cigarette. Go on and touch on that, Christopher.
Yeah, I mean, and we're going to see also, again, later on, just to give a little sneak preview, but this is something that, again, we haven't fully experienced. We didn't have the separate drinking fountains. We didn't, at least I didn't, experience where, when African-American musicians were touring in the South at hotels and motels, and if a black person went into the swimming pool, everybody got out. All the white people got out. That's that type of ignorance, that type of, can I say, stupidity? I mean,
it was
how will I offend here?
Yeah,
it's just so, it's beyond disgusting. And yet attitudes like this still persist in our country today in 2020.
It's incomprehensible. And for those of us, who remember Sammy Davis Jr., who was not allowed to stay at the same hotels that he performed in Las Vegas. Fortunately, Frank Sinatra came to his aid. We've seen it with Nat King Cole. We've seen it in other ways. Just an incomprehensible situation that existed, and barriers that were put up that we see in this film being brought down to some extent as the movie progresses.
Yeah. And so the fact that these guys are doing something in just such close physical proximity, sharing a meal, sharing a cigarette together, from my mouth to yours. I mean, this is huge. I don't think we can realize, the impact of these images are, because, we are, how many years removed from 1958. So I think this is a very great first scene to really start to show the development of their characters and their rapport bonding together. So, do you have any other thoughts on this scene?
Let's move on to the next key scene.
Okay. All right. So let me pull up the next scene. You want to mention about the next scene? Talk about what we're going to see about them outside town.
Yes, earlier in his life, Noah had worked on a turpentine farm, if you may, and he knew of one. And both men in the dark of night approached this town, waiting for the populace to go to sleep so they could break into a store and get some food and provisions and then move on their escape. And the two of them are hiding in the background, watching the town go to sleep, really, and have again a continuation of this very profound awakening that each one has of the other, that you will see becomes even tighter and more significant while they're watching the lights go out in the town. And it's interesting because as each light dims, they have an additional awakening, or again, an additional awareness of each other as the scene progresses.
Okay. And again, as I was pulling up, I'm not sure if you had made the point, maybe you did, I'm sorry. Their goal in trying to get into this general store is to find the tools that will break the chain.
Correct, yeah.
That is their main objective here. They just want to get free of each other. All right, so let me pull this up.
It don't look like much. At the company store.
Yeah. There's tools in there. And food, too. Waiting for us. They'll be asleep pretty soon. We better hunker down before somebody sees us. They slopping the hogs. That means supper time's over.
I used to feed the hogs at the prison farm sometime. That sure was a nice farm.
Yeah, all that machinery.
You know something, a fella get himself a farm, he'd have a pretty sweet setup.
As long as the fella don't have to scratch it out with hand tools and a mule.
Leastways, you always got something to eat.
I worked 36 acres by hand once. My wife had me. Sometimes even my little kid. Man, we never had enough to eat.
I didn't know you was married. What happened to your kid?
He's just 5 years old when I left. He don't even remember me no more.
Everybody winds up alone, not just you, everybody. That's the way it is. One down, 5 to go. Take an old man around someplace. Last time I seen him since I was 14 years old was the day I got out of the army. And we spent half my bonus check getting lushed up together. I got nothing against him.
My old man, he was a Bible thumper. Oh, he was always trying to teach us something.
What's there to know? I used to work in automobiles, transmission man. $1.80 an hour, so some think driving a Cadillac could drive it around without having to shift gears.
That's pretty good pay.
Well, maybe for you it's pretty good. You know what it meant to me? Saturday night in a gin mill. being charlotte potatoes with a blonde or maybe a redhead. Anything I wanted. Then bright and early Monday morning, there I was back in that pit with the grease in my eyeballs.
Yeah, somebody gotta fix them cars.
Yeah, well, let somebody else fix them cars. Me, I want to drive them.
You gotta buy them first.
$1.80 an hour? That's just a stopover for a second-hand Chevy. No, not for me. I got smart. You're a maker or a taker. Me, I'm a taker.
Yeah, and that's how come you wound up in jail.
I wound up in jail because I didn't know how to be a big enough taker. I was just a stealer. You gotta be a big crook, a big enough crook so you can get away with anything.
Just a few more lines now.
What'd they get you for?
Assault and battery. Intent to kill.
Oh, that's great.
Man come on my land because I didn't pay the note. I gave him an argument, he pulled a gun on me. I took it away from him.
They put you in jail for that?
I whipped his head good.
Were you going to kill him?
Maybe. If they hadn't pulled me off him, I would have.
You gotta learn to roll with them punches.
Yeah.
What are you getting so mad about?
I ain't getting mad, Joker. I've been mad all my natural life.
I'm just telling you the facts of life.
I don't want to hear it. I've been listening to that stuff all my life. From my wife, be nice. They throw me in solitary confinement and she said, be nice. Man short-weighted me when I turned in my crop. She said, be nice or you get in trouble. She teach my kid that same damn thing. Never could get that woman to understand how I was feeling inside. All of a sudden, there was nothing left to say. Ain't they never gone to sleep? I used to think if I could get away someplace, you know? Someplace where folks weren't always so afraid. Maybe she won't be so afraid all the time. Yeah. There you go.
Well, that buttons it up for the night. We leave now, they'll be sleeping when we get down there. Come on. What's the matter?
Your white face, it shines out like a full moon.
What am I
Don't take it wrong.
What am I going to do about it?
I don't know what you... Yeah.
How's that?
Just a couple of swells. Now just the meanness shines through.
Well, we sure look alike.
Check. Come on.
Okay.
Powerful, powerful scene.
Wow, I was just thinking the same thing. It's just such incredible writing and the performances. Wow.
It's
All
the
right.
heart of the movie. It's the heart of the film, I believe here.
Yeah.
And I said to you, and maybe I'm being a little bit silly or even corny with it, but those lights were similar to me of a symphony, of a crescendo. They were studying. Noah was watching those lights go off, but while the lights were going off, there was a tempo to the discussion that these two men were having about each other's deepest secrets. He's talking about his wife and his child, and Joker is talking about his father. And each time a light went out, there was a little bit more to the conversation about their mistakes and about what they wanted to achieve. They were wide open to each other, and quite honestly, to me, there was no more chain. Although the chain is symbolized there, and they were trying to, as you said, get the tools to take the chain off. They had no chain between them anymore at that point.
That's a great comment. That's another great comment of yours, Howard. You really have these wonderful insights. But what do you think about almost, it's like you think about having an awareness or an epiphany where you come to a new realization or understanding, and then they say, oh, a light went on. But here, the lights went off.
Right.
So it's almost like reverse. What do you make of the idea? Well, each time they got closer in a realization, a light went off.
Because they're sharing, I think, some dark challenges in their lives that they're talking about. The loss of his wife. He's never going to see his son again. His father, in Joker's case, is who knows where he is if he's around. The light going off is actually indicative of a darker experience between them, as opposed to the light coming on and it's shining on them. They're going the other direction in their discussion, and they're finding solace between each other through the way they respond to each other. So the light goes off, and there's another dark tale to tell about $1.80 an hour. He's never going to buy a car at $1.80 an hour.
Yeah.
He had an experience of a solitary confinement. He's not going to see his son again, and he called him my kid, not my son. It was my kid. If you notice, there's a loss to him of the relationship with that child.
Very good.
All of that comes as the lights go off.
Yes. Well said. A very great insight. Very true. For me, what started this was this scene was I started to notice Joker's empathy when he discovered about Noah having a wife. So there you started to see the first emotional connection, in this scene, about that. And then Joker comes out with the line, "Everybody winds up alone, not just you." So there is a bond with understanding their condition as far as the human condition. We're all in this together. We're all we were born into this world alone. We go out alone. But within our being alone, is almost implied. How can we be there for each other?
Correct.
And it's interesting. Of course, I love. What do you take? Your take on the line where Tony Curtis says, "You have to be a taker or a maker."
Well, he was dissatisfied with what he was doing in his criminal activity, and he was an underachiever, if you may. And he wasn't, as a criminal, he was a failure as a criminal, and he didn't do what he needed to do. He wasn't thinking big enough. He was just a petty guy. A steal here, something going on there, but he failed as a criminal, is what he's telling.
Notice that he says you have to be a taker, so you take so much that you can get away with anything.
Right.
He makes that point.
He never got to that point.
Yeah.
And he sits, for probably some petty theft activity. He's in the chain gang. And Noah is there because of a bigger issue. He was a bigger player, actually, and you could see that Joker was almost wide-eyed when he said assault with intent to kill. That was, to Joker.
Yes.
Wow, you're a pretty successful guy in this environment. But it took all of Noah's life away from him. It took the farm, it took his wife, it took his child, and then of course he brought out his differences with his wife, who was just willing to go with the flow. And Noah was looking to get on that ark and move on. And his wife was really, be nice, be nice, be nice.
Right. Now, it's funny. This is the section I was thinking about. I noticed something with the camera angle, which was very pivotal, pun intended. For the most part, in the opening, the two shot here, you see Sidney Poitier more like in the background and Tony Curtis is more closer to the camera. The camera then does like a 180, swerves around at the point where the Noah character talks about the attempted murder. Right. At that point, Sidney Poitier is, front and forward, and Tony Curtis is now in the background. So that camera shift. And then at one point, it's a total close-up of just Sidney Poitier when he's talking about the being nice, as you talked about.
Right.
So I think there's definitely an emphasis that the director wanted to show about that. Where in that particular moment, it was just Noah talking about be nice, be nice. I gotta swallow this. I gotta take it. I gotta be nice, be nice. And she goes, I'm teaching my son the same thing, so that legacy will continue most likely. And finally, it ends where, and this is where Tony Curtis is back in the frame, where it's you can see the two people there. He says, I never got her to understand what I was feeling inside. And all in that scene, you could see how the listening, you could see in the Tony Curtis's character, he just was so connected to what he was hearing.
This movie, and I agree with you, this movie was the first time a Black actor was nominated for an Oscar. Sidney Poitier was in this film, and I think that what happened here is that we're seeing, and the public was seeing, something that they hadn't seen before. He has insight, he has intellect, he has concerns and fears that were illustrated and that he spoke of in this film. So an audience looking at this saying, this was not what they had seen perhaps in other films of a Black actor. This is 1958, and this is the first time that this type of a role was shared with the public, and he did just an incredible job of that. When you listen, like you said, with the content that he's talking about and the insights of his life, this is powerful, a powerful discussion. And the white actor in this was the one that was really hanging on his every word in this and listening very carefully to what he was saying.
It's almost like I could see that the connection going like this. At first, they were so far apart. It's almost like they were like this, and then they slowly just started to get closer and closer. Until, as you know, at the end it becomes an unbreakable, strong bond. And then the very last part before they get up, he makes that prolific line. No, he says, I just wish I think he said, I would find a place where people were not so afraid all the time.
Right.
And isn't that the heart? What's at the the crux of racism or ignorance? There's a fear.
Yeah.
What am I threatened by? What am I going to lose? What's going to change? What's going to be different that I can't control? And the perception that it's going to be bad. Mm-hmm. Or evil or whatever, and I think, again, it's through, understanding each other, coming from just totally different backgrounds, different, socially, religiously, it's funny, there's so much taunting, and, they make all these, accusations against each other, and they're going at each other. But it's through that they kind of understand or learn about how they have so much in common.
Right.
So when they're starting to attack each other, it's almost like, wait a minute, what do we do? We're in the same boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's like they're jousting back and forth. And then every so often they take the sword or the lance or whatever it might be called, and they put it down for a moment, and they realize we're in the same place here. We're in the same place. And
yes, it's like once you strip it all down, I mean, we are, I guess, in a sense, to quote the biblical passage, we are our brother's keeper.
Right.
But to what extent? And that's been, I think, been a lifelong, age-old struggle.
And it all comes together in the last snippet of that scene when he covers Joker's face with the mud.
Yes.
And he talks about the meanness only shines through, and that we sure look alike. At this point.
Look at that.
It just, that's he's watching out for Joker. He doesn't want Joker to be seen. But he's worried about the both of them, that they don't get uncovered at that point. And but he's camouflaging him, and they look alike at that point. So they've come together.
Right. Very good. And again, I see a clear thread that carries through this, or almost like building blocks that are building a strong foundation. The more that they learn about each other, their background and how they feel about things and just their lives, they start to, understand and like and respect each other. They come from completely different backgrounds, and of course there's the racial, tension there. But through, learning about each other, they start to build a rapport. They start to like each other a little bit. They start to respect each other, and then from that, they become friends.
Right.
And there's a bond of affection, and one could even dare say love.
Mm-hmm.
And look at how far apart they were in the beginning. But stripped down of all, racial notions or whatever bigotry they were raised on or adopted. That all kind of just falls away.
It does.
Yeah, it's just. Last thing I just want to say is that I think that, they have their frustrations, they have their resentments, they have their disappointments, but they also start talking. He mentions about the farm. Tony Curtis.
Yes.
And the Noah character.
Tony Joker talks about the Hogs and how he really liked that farm. Now these are two gentlemen here that have guys that have run away from their prison environment, but there's some recollection of actually enjoying the machinery on the farm.
Yeah.
And the Hogs.
Yeah.
And Noah, you can see it in his expression because he farmed the land himself.
Yeah.
So he's, they're in other words, they're grieving almost about the same thing. They're running from it, but they feel some sentimentality to the farm.
And I think that there's two sides of the coin that they're both sharing. That's critical to build, a warm rapport and a bond as people from diverse backgrounds, whether religious or social, racial. That they're sharing their disappointments and their frustrations and their bitterness, but also they're sharing their hopes and their dreams.
And we just saw this through the George Floyd protest. We saw people of all colors, sizes, backgrounds, shapes, and ideas walking together hand in hand.
Yes.
In cities across the country for a common goal of bringing attention to a horrible situation.
Yep.
These two men are solitary, one white man, one black man, but they're doing the very same thing 62 years ago.
Yeah. Well said, Howard. Well said. Grant, else you want to add about this particular scene?
No, I'm excited to get to the last scene and share that.
Okay. Let's get there. All right. So as I pull this up, Howard, why don't you be so kind just to talk a little about the last scene that we're going to see?
Yeah, and I don't want to be a spoiler with this because it's important to see it if you've never seen it. You're going to see the culmination of everything that Christopher and I have been speaking about in this presentation that you're watching. You're going to see two men come completely together in a few moments.
Okay. All right, I have it, and you can see it. I'm going to play. This is the last scene of the movie. Here we go.
Okay.
You hurt bad?
I feel fine.
Sure you do.
You gonna make somebody fine old lady one day.
Ain't it the truth?
Them the dogs.
Just rest easy, Joe.
Colin,
Yeah.
we gave him a hell of a run for it, didn't we?
Yeah.
Charlotte potatoes. I'm mashed potatoes now. So are you.
We're doing all right, Joe.
Yeah.
Long gone. Ain't he lucky? Long gone to Kentucky. I left my home in Nashville. Look here what I got. 20 long years on a chain gang, sweating and busting rock. Judge, he come from Memphis, put me in the pen. If I ever do see his face once more, he never get home again. That judge be long gone to Kentucky. Long gone, don't mean baby. Long gone, what I mean. A long gone judge on a bowling green. Bowling green, sewing machine. A little kitten sitting on a sewing machine. Sewing machine, so fast. Sew 11 stitches in a little cat's tail. Bowling green, sewing machine.
Wow.
So when you look at this scene, one of the things that we couldn't show here is that at the very beginning of the movie, when Noah is singing that song, Joker gets up and wants to slug him, wants to punch him out because he's annoyed by the song.
Yeah.
And we, an hour and 30 some odd minutes later or whatever it might be, they're embraced, and he embraces the song along with the.
Yeah, he's enjoying it. Clearly.
He's enjoying the song.
Yeah.
They've gone full circle.
Yes.
There's so much in this scene that we can touch on. In fact, he says to him, "You're going to make somebody a fine old lady one day." Now that might have been fighting words at another time and place to make a comment,
Right.
but it wasn't here, because how does he respond? He says, "Ain't that the truth?"
Good point.
They were together in every sense of the word at this point. And I know, Christopher, you have some things to add in this, but one of the things that I picked up on is he says, and I hope it was clear enough you could understand it, he says, "We gave him a hell of a run for it, didn't we?"
Yes.
They team at that point. It just wasn't, we gave him a hell of a run. The writers put in there, didn't we?
We.
It was we at that point.
It's a good point. Yes, absolutely. They were together. They united. Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I believe this is the intent of the writers and the director. I'm not sure it was so clear, but when they're jumping on the train, and it was obvious that Noah was on his way to freedom, and he was safely on the train, but Joker wasn't. And even though they had, grabbed hands, Joker, because of it, he was injured. He was shot actually earlier, which I don't know if you, obviously the viewers did not see. He was wounded by a rifle shot by another character in the movie that again the viewers would see if they watched it in the shoulder. So he was weak and he couldn't keep up the pace. So he fell behind. But the Noah character deliberately jumped off the train. There was no reason for him to fall off that train. He chose to be with his friend.
Their friendship, their relationship made it easy to sacrifice at that point. Now, no one knows certainly what would have become of Noah after that had he stayed on the train. That's not the story. He sacrificed. We've seen this done in battles in the military where people have come together of different colors to support and die for each other. And it's been done. We've seen that here. He sacrificed for his friend. They were a team.
Yes. I just think it's important to make that clear that Tony Curtis did not pull the Sidney Poitier character off the train.
No.
The break was made. The hands were apart when they were running.
Correct.
And so it was his choice to. That's a very, very big moment. And then I saw this. I don't know the exact moment, but when Sidney Poitier gives Tony Curtis the cigarette, I think it was almost before the moment they heard the dogs.
I think you're right.
Because he kind of like paused and realized what he did. He's now giving him the cigarette.
Yes.
And he's almost like thinking about, wow, look what I just did. And Tony Curtis, of course, just took it. He was grateful for the cigarette. And then they hear the dogs. Yeah. And Tony Curtis is the one that says, it's the dogs. But that was again, a major point. And then when he starts singing, and there's minimal dialogue here, but so much is done through the behavior, which of course what good acting is really all about. It's the behavior. And there, it's almost like, Joker just kind of rests back and he's just enjoying the song, where, as you said before, he formerly just hated it with a passion. And now he's just, relaxing into it. And let's talk about that phrase that we discussed before about Bowling Green.
Go ahead, yeah.
And what that may mean, in the song and to the story. Bowling Green, which is turf that is a very level, smooth, close-knit kind of turf that's used for outdoor bowling. And he's talking about, in the song, a sewing machine. Bowling Green sewing machine. So if you stitch something that's very close-knit, that's very level, in this case level, it's very equal, and it's smooth. There's no bumps, there's no holes, it's completely level, smooth.
What a sewing machine does, it mends.
Yes.
It mends two separate entities and it brings them together into one.
Yes.
And that's the symbol. That chain brought them together.
Yeah.
The sewing machine mends. It doesn't tear apart, and it brought the two men together. And that's why it ends on that note, sewing machine. And that's
brilliant
message that the writers have given us. Now, regardless of what happens to them, the two of them, when they go back to the prison, they are one at this point. And the sheriff, who wasn't developed in our presentation, was a rather liberal, good-hearted soul who came upon them and wanted to be the one to get to them at the end of the movie, unlike the harsh state police officer that was involved with this. And he approached them, and you could see how he put his gun away and he almost had a smile on his face because he saw the two of them where they stood at that point.
He kind of shook his head and just, put his gun away. And maybe in a way was relieved that it ended this way instead of a blood battle.
Right.
and saw them as human beings. Yeah. I like what you said. You know, they were brought together, forged in oppression and chains, but in the end, they were knit together. You
Yes.
know, in mind and heart.
In mind and heart.
Yeah.
You know, in my research of this, when I mentioned Bosley Crowther, who did the review, he summed it up, and I'm going to quote him here. He said, "In the end, it is clear that they are brothers, stripped of all vulgar bigotry. These two men who think they are so profoundly different are in basic respects the same. Each is the victim of cruel oppressions. Each has his hopes and dreams, and each, as a consequence of frustrations, has committed crime."
Yeah.
Quote.
Yeah. Well said. Succinctly, thoroughly to the point. Yes, absolutely. I can't say enough about this film. Excellent. Excellent. Ahead of its time, prophetic. And I think it, again, pertains to issues that we're seeing today, you know, in our country. I would encourage people that have taken the time to look at our first presentation. I want to thank everyone who's been watching this. We would like to follow up with a second film that we're going to present, hopefully in not too far in the future, and continue this idea about talking about films that matter, films that have a social impact, and historical ones in that sense, but relate to today.
Of
You know,
course.
the issues that we face.
And
Is there anything else you want to say in summary?
I'm going to end with a final quote, not from Bosley, but when we think of this movie, we think of this film, and we think of the times when it was made, and the times that we have today. I'm going to end with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And the quote is, "People fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other." And I think that's the takeaway.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to, again, thank everyone that's taken the time to watch this. So on behalf of, you know, my colleague, my actor, friend, Howard Diamond, myself, Christopher Rawlings, we appreciate you taking the time to join us in looking at this movie, The Defiant Ones, 1958, Tony Curtis, Sidney Poitier. Again, directed by, again, Howard.
Stanley Kramer.
Stanley Kramer. Again, a prolific director, and the writers. Great movie. And actually also, too, as an aside, this is the final movie that Carl Switzer, who was Alfalfa of the Little Rascals, performed in. So people have a little bit of a trivia mindset, and they're particularly interested about the Little Rascals, you know, the R Gang comedies. The Alfalfa character, this was his final film that he did.
Yes.
And it's interesting,
Yes.
the character that he plays in this movie has, I think, a very interesting place, you know, in this film. So that's maybe an extra incentive for people. So thank you for joining us. We'll say good evening for now. Until next time. All right. Thank you. Okay. Okay. All right.
Done? Recording's done?
I believe so. I believe so. So